So thank you for being here for this, the Canmore Trust podcast. We'll be dealing with subjects of mental ill health and also of suicide. Your safety is paramount to us here at the Canmore Trust, and so if anything of today's discussion activates or concerns you about your own safety, would you please reach out? There are a number of ways of doing that. You can engage directly with the Canmore Trust by texting us anytime, day or night, texting Canmore, Canmore, to 85258. You can also contact the Papyrus 24/7 Helpline on 0800 068 4141. And you can also call the Samaritans any time of the day or night on 116 123, 116 123. The Canmore Trust's website, www.thecanmoretrust.co.uk, has an extensive list of resources for anyone seeking help on any aspect of well-being, mental ill health or suicide. So please, if you're struggling, would you please reach out? And please, if you're concerned about someone else, also reach out. Thank you. So now to today's amazing guest, and I'm feeling a little bit starstruck, I have to say, which is a little bit unusual for me. But I have with me today the amazing Amy Irons. And Amy, it's just great to have you here.
Oh, John, it's brilliant to be here with you and sitting on this side of a microphone to be interviewed.
Yes, well,
there's not many people I'd feel comfortable doing that with, so that says a lot about you.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got lots to talk about. Mm-hmm. I'm sure most of us will know you, Amy, as a result of your television and radio presence, but maybe not so much about yourself and your background. And I wonder if you would just tell us something about your background, where you grew up, your family life and your education, and how you got into broadcasting.
So I'm from Stirling initially. So I was born in I lived in a little place called Gorgunnock, just outside Stirling. Ah. So I was there. My mum and dad then split up when I was quite young. So it was me and my brother Lewis, who also works in broadcasting. You might see him on the BBC as well. So there was the two of us, and we then moved down to Dumfries, and we spent our time between Dumfries and Stirling, but went to school in Dumfries. And how would I describe myself as a kid, John? I'd probably say that as much as I come across as someone that's quite confident and extroverted now, I was very shy. I was very nervous, quite anxious, was picked on a lot at school. And the subjects that I found probably that made such a difference to me is probably why I'm doing this now. So I found drama quite an escape when I was at school. I think it was an escape from some of the things that were going on in family life at the time. And it also allowed me to be this other person. Yeah. So I would put on this different hat and we'd go into the drama studio. So initially I really wanted to be an actress. And I did higher and advanced higher drama and English. And I thought, I'm going to go and become an actor. This is really what I want to do. And typical sensible parents, or so they thought, putting their hat on, said, you can still do acting, but why don't you go to uni and do something else? And it was at that point I was actually performing in a play in the theatre in Dumfries, and I was a newsreader. I almost like to think of it as Jennifer Aniston in the morning show now. So I was performing this role as a newsreader, and I thought, this is similar to acting. You're performing. I'd done a bit of work experience at the radio station, so I thought journalism would be a good route to go down. And that's really where it began. I went to uni. I somehow managed to get a first class, which was quite shocking if you knew how often I went out, John, during my uni years. And then I got my first job back at the very radio station that I used to go into when I was 15, West Sound. And from then it's, I won't bore you with my whole CV, but I've worked at STV and Capital and BBC and Premier Sports, and I just consider myself very lucky to be able to do this job.
Amazing. But there's a bit of sport in there as well, clearly. Yes?
Yes, there's a bit of sport.
And your dad was a bit of sporting royalty as well, really.
So my dad was a footballer. He was then a manager, so he played for a whole host of different teams, Partick Thistle, Dunfermline, St Johnstone. I don't know if you remember the rise of Gretna. He was the manager then when they got promoted to the top flight. So football's always been in my blood, because it was on every television in the house and it was every point of discussion within our family. I've also got 4 brothers. So football and sport has always been a constant, really. And I love watching football. Again, PE, it was kind of PE and drama that I did at school. Just a good outlet, I would say, for me. So I'm still a very active person and love my football because of my dad, yeah.
And do you play football?
So I played a little bit of football. But I am too old. That there were no girls teams.
Too old.
There were no girls teams, and I must say that's one thing that when I look at now the rise of the women's game, it is so heartening to see the fact that girls have opportunities that even women that I'm in my 30s that we didn't have. So I played in a couple of tournaments, but I was always playing with boys. There was me and one other girl I always remember that were in the team. I played some 5-a-side football with boys at uni. But no, I never properly got into playing football at any decent level. So the fact that girls now can do that I just think it's fantastic and so overdue.
Wonderful. And then, of course, there's moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And you had this wonderful growing up, a great time at university, jobs ongoing. And then I guess the reason that you're here is that suicide hit and hit you hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you can tell us a bit about that and the fact that you lost Wayne, your partner, to suicide. Can you just share a wee bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, John. So I feel it feels quite ignorant to say that suicide was a word that wasn't even in my vocabulary before then. I had never thought about it. I'd never witnessed anybody feeling suicidal. I'd never lost anyone through suicide. And what was I in working out my age in 2018? So I would have been, was I 27? So in my late 20s, and Wayne, God bless him, was my partner, and he was the kind of person that anybody who knew him would describe him, that he'd walk into a room and he would light it up. Yeah. He had a level of confidence and charisma that I think I could only ever hope for. And he was this big personality, life and soul of a party. But I think probably the thing that bonded us in a way quite quickly, because our relationship was quite, we moved quickly, and it was that classic, I think after the day we met, we never spent a day apart. We'd both had similar things go on in our childhood, and we'd had some things happen to us, and we were both eldest children that almost had this parental responsibility over our siblings at times, and there was just so many things that we really understood each other. But unfortunately for Wayne, there was a struggle with some of the things that had happened, and there was a side to him that it's only really now looking back that I fully understand. And he was suicidal. And I think the hardest thing was that we didn't even realise that that's what was going on. Sure. Like he wouldn't articulate that that's how he was feeling. Yep. But there were, incidents, and, won't go into detail, but there were incidents where he just didn't want to be here, and then would come through the other side, and it was almost, I don't know why I felt like that, and it was a roller coaster for him, emotionally. It was a roller coaster for me and the people that were closest to him as well. And it then came to 2018, and he'd made a few attempts by this point. We'd been in the hospital. I'd stopped him a few times. And ultimately, the last time, I wasn't there and didn't get back in time, which, again, is what I struggled with afterwards for so long. But it's difficult because I know suicide affects people in so many different ways. But I think what I found so difficult was with Wayne, every time he would come through this, he'd never wanted to die. Yeah. And I think that's what I found really hard. And if I thought about suicide before, I think my impression would have been that it's somebody that knows this is what they want and they've planned it and they leave a note. And I had all these...
The classic Hollywood story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The classic story that you would have been familiar with. But this was a completely unknown... it was just a really messy, difficult situation to try and get my head around, because I knew, and there were so many things around the incident itself that I knew that he didn't mean to do it. But I also knew inevitably that it would happen if this pattern of behaviour kept continuing. So it was a real contradiction of knowing that he didn't want to do it, but also fearing that one day this might actually happen. I think
increasingly I understand that suicide, in many ways, death is a byproduct of suicide, which is a strange thing to say, but it's people who are in incapacitating pain, whether that's physical or emotional or in other ways, and they simply can't see a way forward. Yeah,
I think looking back now, that's what's so clear, is that was these attempts. It was about stopping the pain right now. Yeah. It was about the fact that Wayne could not see the light at all. It was just complete darkness in these moments. And I think that's what's hard for people who are then around that, is you want so bad somebody to be able to see that light and find that hope. Yeah. But it's really, really difficult if somebody can't. Yeah. And I also wish I had the answers as to how you could help somebody find that hope, the amount of times I thought, if I could just get inside his brain and try and understand this and try and figure a way, lead him through the darkness effectively, I would, that's all I would want for him. Yeah. But it's so difficult to do that.
Yeah. And I think we'll come on to the campaign that you've been involved with recently with Suicide Prevention Scotland, but it's very clear to me that the tenor of our words are changing. So I think we used to talk about hope as, hang on, tomorrow will be a better day. And now I'm hearing, can I encourage you to hang on because tomorrow may be a better day? There's a gentleness to it that we can't any longer, because of the brokenness of the world, brokenness of families, poverty and everything else. We can't say tomorrow will definitely be a better day. Our politicians overpromise and struggle to deliver. So I think there is a greater gentleness in the world to say, please hang on, please stay around, because tomorrow might be a better day. We might find a way to offer hope tomorrow.
Rather than, as you say, this promise of tomorrow will be a better day, things will get better. Yeah. This promise, effectively, that we are trying to make with words that we can't actually make. And I think that's so important. And it's about, if you can try and help somebody find that little thing to hold on to, rather than promising that everything is going to be okay tomorrow. And as we spoke about on the podcast that I know we'll mention at some point, I live by getting up and making the bed every morning. And I say that as someone who isn't always there. There's times I've spent days in my bed and haven't moved. Yeah. But if you can get someone who's feeling suicidal, we're not promising we're going to make everything better. We're not going to wave this magic wand and flick a switch and you're not going to feel like this tomorrow. But let's try and find the little glimmers of hope, the flashes of light, and hold on to those.
Love it.
Hold on to just making the bed. Hold on to it can be absolutely anything. Yeah. And it's, and I know I say that and it sounds so easy to do, but I also know it isn't easy to do. Yeah.
Well, can we come on to that? Because, and first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss and what you've been through. But you, like many of us, have attempted to turn what is an horrific experience into something to help others with. And thank you for that. And thank you for joining this band of individuals who are trying to make this suicide community a safe and good place for us to move forward from. I really appreciate you being part of that. But after Wayne died, you then entered your own suicidal crisis. And I wonder if you could share a wee bit about that, because it's clear from the feedback that we get from our podcasts that people listen in, and some of those people are genuinely struggling. Some of these people are suicidal, and we'll come to the advice that you might give someone at the end of the podcast. But it's really important that people identify a story and say, things, that's me, that I was there too. So would you mind sharing a wee bit about that?
Yeah, of course, John. I think because of the nature of Wayne's death and the guilt that I had about not being there and not getting there on time, and it was, my phone was out of battery, and I was all of these things that I really focused on the fact that I felt it was my job to have done something. I could have saved him. I could have stopped this. And I just couldn't handle the guilt that I felt about not being able to be there when he needed me the most. And I found myself being in this really awful headspace of just, I think I'd passed the initial shock period and everybody rallies round you and it's just about getting through the days. And I found myself, it was a good few months down the line that I just didn't know what to do with myself anymore. And I felt when I was in that headspace, I don't know if it was a case of feeling like I would understand him, or I don't understand suicidal ideation enough. There'll be experts that can explain why your mind works like that after losing somebody like that. But I just felt, I felt responsible. I felt guilty. I felt that this was effectively I should pay in some way. Wow. That there had to be, almost like there has to be some kind of payoff. There has to be a reason for this. There has to be somebody that's responsible or something that's responsible. And I think that's been the hardest thing, and what is really difficult for anybody that's lost somebody through suicide is there are always going to be questions that you will never have the answer for. Yeah. And you don't realise how important that is with grief. I was really close to my two granddads, and I was with one of them when he died from cancer. And as much as there was the whole grieving process, you can point to the cause of why they're not here anymore. Yeah. If somebody, and that can also be in traumatic situations, whether it can be sudden, or it's a car crash, or it's a sudden cardiac arrest, or whatever it is. As much as that's still a trauma, your brain can compute that this is why this person's not here. You
can do that's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas I couldn't do that with Wayne, and you couldn't do it with Cameron, and it's that unanswered question and all the things that you wish you could have done differently and the time you wish you would get back with them. Yeah. That energy has nowhere to go, and I just got into this really hopeless place of, and I've said this before, and I was on the radio at the time. Nobody would have known. I was going in and doing a breakfast show, and you would have heard more laughing than you would have actual conversation. And I was coming back to my flat, and I was drinking at midday, and I was cutting myself off from everyone. And the actress in me that I talk about was so good at pretending that I was fine. Oh. But I wasn't fine. And there were a couple of, luckily I had some friends that knew something was up, and they intervened at one point. And then another point, I just took myself somewhere, and I just thought, I don't think I can continue this. But I'm so glad I did.
And so are we. Thank you, Amy, for being here. Really appreciate that.
Because I do. I think that's so important, is that you will have so many bad days, but give yourself the chance, because if I had done what I was going to do,
the devastation.
Yeah. And I think that's really what stopped. That's really what stopped me, was I can't imagine what this would do to my mum, dad, brothers. And that was my thing to hold on to. And that's not about saying, oh gosh, I need to, people feel like they're staying for other people. But
that can add to the guilt trip, can't it?
That can add to the guilt. But it's just finding those things to hold on to and knowing that as bad as you feel right now, this kind of pain, this really acute pain that you're feeling right now, isn't going to be forever. That's not to say you won't feel it again and again and again. Yeah. But in between those really difficult, painful days, there is life.
So thank you for sharing. Yeah, and there will be many people who watch this podcast who will absolutely resonate with that. And I say again to you, I think there's a real raw honesty coming into the discussion. Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful that you're part of that. Yeah, because you're in television and radio and you're up there somewhere, and now we're having a really grounded discussion about the impact of suicide and what it has done to you and how it sits with you. And I know that you underwent counselling and support and found your way through this. One of the most difficult questions that people said to me when I was going through all of my struggles after Cameron died, and they still continue, I think, was be kind to yourself. And I was speaking in Manchester last week at the Suicide Bereavement UK conference. I was speaking about my journey and how I found purpose out of our brokenness. But one of the most difficult questions or concepts that people would bring to me during the time, whether it was family or friends or psychotherapists or whatever, was, John, be kind to yourself. And I found it a really difficult concept. Do you have any comment on that? Do you find it easy to be kind to yourself? Or in those moments, did you say, oh, yes, I'm going to be kind to myself?
I'm going to be kind to myself now.
Yeah.
I would say that's something I've only learned to do in the last few years. And I think, I can go back to even just thinking about what the kind of person I was as a kid and a teenager. I always, I remember feeling responsible for my mum and dad splitting up when I was about 7. So I've always been someone who I think sets a really high bar of expectation for myself and takes things really, I feel things really heavy and really deeply.
So you're an empath?
Yeah.
Yes, you feel it?
Yeah. I feel it. I feel these things. And as I say, for a long time after Wayne, I felt terrible, but then I felt guilty for not doing enough with my voice and my profile and things. And I thought, gosh, I've not done enough. I'm in a job where I speak for a living. I should be doing more. I should be helping more people. And I felt guilty about not having the capacity to be able to do that. I felt guilty for moving on. When I met someone else, I felt so, I wasn't being kind to myself. I was being so hard on myself. Yeah. And what I would say is being kind to myself and what that has looked like over the last few years. For me, it's actually been putting boundaries in and protecting myself and treating myself as if I almost was another person. I don't know if that makes sense. But
I like this idea.
I had to start realising when I was feeling like I'd given too much energy or I was feeling low. So I would put in boundaries and I'd say, I'm taking a full day for myself. I am not running around doing things for other people. I am taking that day off work. I'm not going to that social event. I'm not going to that networking event. And I started treating myself as if I was looking after another person.
Interesting.
But I actually started doing that internally. And I had to make a real conscious decision of start looking after yourself, Amy.
I love that concept. I think that's revolutionary.
I have it's an Amy date day a month. So it can be anything. It can be watching a series back to back and not leaving the house. It can be going, I'll take myself a walk somewhere.
I love that.
Just doing things for me.
So
it's being kind to myself now.
Well, you've recently become involved in an amazing series of events with Suicide Prevention Scotland's campaign, which is entitled What If a Conversation About Suicide Could Save a Life? And for those listening who haven't accessed that yet, there are 4 remarkable podcasts, the final one being issued today. I guess I want to ask you, having guided through that and been part of that, and you've spoken to any number of people in that, myself included, and that was a privilege to be part of that podcast. It was a very special moment for all of us. What do you think you've learnt? If you were to distill all these conversations in the podcast down, what do you think you've learnt as you've listened to people and engaged in those conversations?
I've certainly learned that suicide touches more people than you would ever imagine. Because I don't know if you felt this, but I felt so isolated.
Indeed.
I still felt shame, and I felt like I couldn't talk to people, or I just felt the word suicide was almost hanging over me.
Yeah.
And it's not until you're in a room with people that it's almost like the weight comes off, and you're speaking to people, you're speaking to fathers, you're speaking to partners, you're speaking to professors, you're speaking to campaigners, you're speaking to people who've been suicidal themselves, you're speaking to people who've lost through suicide. You're bringing all these people together in a way who are all so different, but we've all been, as you say, we're in this club that we don't want to be in for different reasons, but we're doing the important thing, which is having a conversation.
Yeah.
And having a conversation without feeling the weight and the shame and the guilt and all of that. It really felt such an open, welcoming forum for that kind of discussion, which I think is so important because, as you know, not every discussion will have felt like that. When we've been going into workplaces, or I've had to speak to a boss, or I've been speaking to family and friends after losing Wayne, they're still not comfortable conversations. Yeah. They're not always comfortable conversations. You don't really feel like people understand. Whereas everybody that was part of that podcast series, you just feel understood. Yeah. You just feel they get it.
There's an amazing moment in the third podcast where one of the guests explains a moment when he had been suicidal and deeply broken when he turned up for work, and he found himself welling up with tears. You know, this big hard man, and his boss said, "Your P45's in the post." Remarkable, you know, that the lack of compassion, the lack of understanding. So I completely agree with you. And for me, that moment was going into a SOBS meeting, Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, 3 months after Cameron died. And I walked into, and I think there were almost 40 people in the room or thereabouts. And the sense of belonging, the sense of not having to explain, it's so tiring when you have to keep explaining why you're crying, explaining why you're not smiling. And you walk into this room and everyone looks at you and says, "Welcome, you're home." And these became my second family. You know, they were the hugs and no hugs, smiles and no smiles. And then the amazing thing for me, and we've talked about this, where you can all be crying, you know, as someone shares a story of their loss, their grief, and then 5 minutes later, you're all laughing hysterically, yeah. And that sense of that's okay, you know. It would be okay for Wayne and Cameron to say, "It's okay to laugh, Amy, it's okay to laugh, John," because we need to learn to live and grow again. I want to talk a wee bit about sport, if I may, because sport's obviously a big part of your life. I think sport is great. I think sport is wonderful for good mental health. But there's also a flip side of that when, particularly in the professional sporting world, where the competitive environment and the having to be something and then you lose that world can become really difficult. And certainly Canmore Trust have dealt with a number of professional sports people who have been, you know, sacked from a team or they're no longer involved, where that's been a really difficult journey. Have you any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And especially, you know, various levels in sport. There's this idea that if somebody's a professional, they're making enough money to, you know, they can buy their house and that's them set up.
Yeah.
And probably 99% of cases that just isn't what happens. And you'll have athletes who, and sportsmen and women who, they've put everything into, whether, for example, talking about my dad becoming a footballer, you know, they've maybe moved away from home when they were 15. They've probably felt quite isolated from the friends that they had because they're having to train a certain way and they're having to eat a certain way. And I feel like there's this whole build-up to trying to get to something. And there's another big question about what it actually feels like when you get to the goals that you've set yourself. Yeah. But there's a real lack of understanding, I think, as to what somebody does when their career ends, if they're injured, or just the aging process. I mean, none of us want to get older anyway, but when we're talking about people in their 30s,
some of us have no option.
When we're talking about people in their 30s, you know, you've been done and retired. It's not something that many of us need to think about at such a young age, and I think that's why it's so important. I think, and whether it's, you know, I know the Footballers Association in Scotland particularly, they're really big on it, whether it's trying to find another outlet, another route, another plan for players, because it's so important to have that, almost that other part of you, that you're not defined by the fact you're a footballer. If this doesn't work out, it's okay. I feel like that sometimes I feel like that as a presenter. It's, what if I didn't want to do this tomorrow? Yeah. It's, what if I didn't want to go on the telly again or go on the radio again? When you feel in a way that people define you by what you do. And it's, you know, oh, we're so proud of you. Oh, I've seen you doing this. I've seen you doing that. That might not always be for me. And I think it's about trying to really help guide people, particularly in sport, to try and find that other outlet when it doesn't.
You've developed this concept of being kind to yourself. I love this concept. So it's almost like that again, where you can, you know, see yourself as another person almost, and invite yourself to that mentorship, that you know, developmental understanding where, well, I could do something differently. I could be something different. I
describe it as, because what I found, especially dealing with probably my mental health wasn't very, what I was struggling with is I was wearing the mask all the time. Yep. And I remember speaking to a therapist about this, that I was exhausted and I couldn't work out why I was so burnt out. And then I realised the mask of presenter Amy, that's bubbly, that's chatty, that's outgoing, that's extroverted, that's actually all the things that normal Amy isn't. Okay. All these things, that's the mask that I had on. And we all have a mask that we put on to go to work or to deal with certain things. But the problem was the mask was never coming off. So it was effectively, it was completely suffocating me. I couldn't, that's how I would describe it. I felt the pressure of being this person, and it was leading to burnout completely last year. And so now I actually think of it in my head as, there's presenter Amy, but then it's okay when that mask comes off, that I can be down. I don't want to talk all the time. I'm not always smiling. I'm not always social. I do get anxious. And seeing them as two different things is what has probably really helped me.
It's really helpful.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into my next question, which, do you think that those who are in the front line with celebrity status, I'm going to give you major celebrity status.
That's very kind, John. I wouldn't go that far. But
you'll have it.
I'll take it just for today.
Take it for the podcast. Do you think people who are in television and radio and media are more at risk of mental ill health?
I don't know. I don't want to make a sweeping statement that I think we are. I can't say that. But what I do think is, I think my career contributes to mine. Yeah. Because I just, whether it's being trolled or the pressure of just performing and always feeling like you're just you're a step away from doing something wrong, then your career's over. And I think just the pressure of the role can build in me, and it's things that's, you just feel it. It's like tight, shoulders, tension in my neck. I've got a pain in my back and these things. And I can feel when things are getting on top of me. And I know that that's the job. And I know that I have been very affected by things that people have said about me online. And I don't think my mental health would suffer as much if I didn't do the job I did.
Okay.
So that's a personal thing. But I know there would plenty of people that suffer poor mental health and don't do the job that I do. But it certainly is a big contributing factor for me, which again is why I take a lot of time to step away from the job I do.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I've people that say, Amy, you're not on social media enough. You don't do this, you don't do that. Or people that go to every other event and I just, I'm sitting in my jammies with my candles on reading a book instead. But it's just because that's my personality. I'm not comfortable all the time in these kind of environments, and I need to protect my mental health, I need to step away from it sometimes.
A wee bit of hope for a moment. We've just had the statistics released for numbers of suicides for 2024. And they're down. So a moment of hope, and that's no solace or consolation for the many hundreds that were affected by suicide in that year, and our hearts absolutely go out to those families, friends, colleagues. But I wondered, what did you think? What were your thoughts when you first heard the news that suicide numbers were down in 2024?
My initial reaction, like you, it was, I wouldn't say it was a particularly strong reaction at all, because I think just for every single one, was it 704?
Yeah.
For every single one of those 704 people and their families, it's still too many. It's still too many. And I remember when I saw the figures come out for 2018 and it was 900 or 1,000. Yeah. I remember looking at the numbers in the news and thought, Wayne's one of those.
Yeah.
Wayne is one of those. And it's easy for other people to look at and say, oh, well, obviously it's come down, which is good. And it's a glimmer of hope, as you say, that maybe some things are working somewhere.
Yeah.
But 704 people is still far too many.
Yeah.
And the ripple effect, the thousands of people,
Indeed,
the kids and the partners and the parents and the friends and the colleagues, the professionals that have had to deal with every single one of those 704 deaths is monumental. So it's not something I ever think I can feel overly positive about. Yeah. But it's hope. There's a glimmer of hope that the numbers have come down.
Yeah. And we hope that trend will continue. But Wayne is not a statistic. Cameron's not a statistic. These hundreds of people are human beings. And they've lost, their families, friends, colleagues have lost catastrophically. But we must hope. We must hope that those numbers will continue to fall. And I think the Suicide Prevention Scotland campaign that you've been part of is actually opening up that conversation, and it's becoming a much more open and honest conversation. Talking about being open and honest, as you've grieved Wayne and you've come through your own suicidal crisis, how would you describe yourself? What have you found out about yourself?
I'm more resilient than I thought. I'm definitely more resilient, but I am also, it's strange, it's almost like the two sides of the coin. I feel more resilient, but I also feel more fragile than I probably ever thought I was.
Yep.
As I said before, I really do feel things quite deeply, and I feel for people, and I feel responsibility, and so I think I've realised I'm a very deep person,
Okay.
which is fine. But yeah, I think the one thing I've taken away is that I'm definitely stronger and more resilient than I thought, and that's another thing I would say to anybody who is feeling suicidal or cannot see a way out. At one point, that was you and I, John.
Yeah, indeed.
And I didn't think that, 7 years on, that I'd be sitting here describing myself as strong and resilient. I really didn't. So the fact that I can now, I'm so glad that I managed to come through those really dark days.
So I'm just going to hold that space for a minute, because there will be someone listening or watching this who needs to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. We've both come through suicidal crisis. There are many people who come through a suicidal crisis. The Canmore Trust deals with those individuals on a daily, regular basis, and they come through that crisis. And so we'll just hold that space for a moment and say, please come through that crisis. Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. In the Canmore Trust, we often use the phrase that today's postvention is tomorrow's prevention. Do you think that's helpful as a concept?
I think so. I really do think so. Just because I think because I've seen since Wayne and been through my own suicidal journey, that after Wayne, there was no help. I remember phoning my doctor and trying to get some kind of therapy. I couldn't even describe it as therapy. I was like, I just need to speak to someone. I have no idea how I'm still getting up day to day. And I was told I had to wait 12 weeks. And, nothing would ever be offered after a traumatic death for at least 12 weeks. And I realised, and the thing's, because I've been for a lot of therapy now, I do know that the kind of therapy and the kind of help that I've had has been so different along the way. And there will be types of therapy that I've had in the last couple of years that wouldn't have been beneficial when I was in those moments of crisis.
Yeah.
But something needs to be done in those moments of crisis. And I couldn't even believe at the time that when we were at the hospital, because Wayne died in hospital, there was no it was
support.
just not even as much as a leaflet.
Yeah.
No signposting.
Thank you and good night. Yeah.
And I am so lucky that I have such a great support network. I had friends and family that really rallied around me. But if you're a person that doesn't have that, and you've gone through something like this, the fact that then people who have lost through suicide, the stats suggest are likely or more likely to feel suicidal themselves.
Yep.
You hope that they never do get to that point. But to me, we should be doing something to try and intervene then.
Absolutely.
Because I could have become one of those 704. You could have become one of those if we didn't have the support that we've got, and if we hadn't managed to come through what we have. And to me, there should be a real recognition that people who lose through suicide, there needs to be treatment for them. There needs to be proper support for them.
We're at risk. Yeah. You were lucky with 12 weeks. I was told 2.5 years. I was put in a 2.5 year waiting list, which, that's for another conversation. But as part of that conversation, can I ask you, because this is we ask difficult questions on this podcast, and I want to ask you the question: if you now became all powerful, and you were given a blank sheet of paper and an unlimited budget, what would you do to bring the number of suicides down in the country?
I think it needs to start with education in kids. I really do. I think I've been into schools a couple of times, and I really do think that the conversation around suicide and mental health and speaking openly needs to be introduced in schools. It needs to be the same way that we're talking about telling our kids, how to stay safe online, or things to look out for health wise. We need to make suicide part of the curriculum. We need to make our children feel comfortable to have the conversations that if they are struggling in any way, we can talk. Yeah. We're here. There are people to help and listen, and the guilt and the shame and the silence that you feel, if we can do anything to try and get our young people to feel that they're in a place that they can talk about it, that would be one thing. The same goes for workplaces. I think we need to be better at supporting people.
Yeah.
And then obviously, as we've just spoken about, what can be done for people who are at risk. And again, I think there's another conversation to be had. I think we've said this before, John. I feel if I could wave a magic wand and create something, it would be a national mental health service. It would be, because there were times I was in A&E with Wayne and this isn't the place for him. Yeah. This is not the place for him. And you then also feel for the staff, because everybody's doing, you've got nurses and doctors that are doing the best that they can possibly do, that our model isn't right. Yeah. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be that there was somewhere, some service that was properly set up for people who are in crisis.
Yeah. And I love that concept as well. And I just think if you dial 999 and you're in crisis at the moment, great to have that service. But the first question you're asked is the casualty breathing? I've made that call on a number of occasions, and I just want peace and quiet. I just want to have a conversation with someone. I'm concerned about someone. And it feels as if there are two emergency numbers. We have a 999 for physical, emergencies, and 998 or 888
for mental health emergencies.
For mental health emergencies. And there are huge initiatives happening across the country. There are paramedics who are dealing specifically with mental health issues. These things are developing, and they're really helpful and really useful. But we definitely need further change, further transformation within the health service to cope with what we've got at the moment. And I guess that leads me to another question, because I'm asking you to think about your own lived and living experience, but also your professional work, combining all of that together now. What have you learned about suicide, firstly? And secondly, what have you learned about how to prevent it? Two big questions.
Yeah. I've learned, certainly about suicide, I've learned that it is not as straightforward as people think.
Utterly complex.
It is so complex. There are so many different strands and experiences and factors, and as you say, my idea of suicide before, and I think it would be the kind of thing that you'd seen depicted somewhere in a movie or a TV series, and it was, someone doesn't want to be here, they write a note, they've made a decision, that's it. And it's so complex. It's so complex. So much so it's almost impossible to try and get your head around and sum it up in one way.
We often describe it in the Canmore Trust as pieces of a jigsaw going in. Yeah. And it could be a 1,000-piece jigsaw. Yeah. It's that complex.
Yeah. So I've learned it's really complex. It's huge in the sense that it touches every single area of society and every single person in every single country in every part of the world. It touches everyone. Yeah. And in terms of what I've learned to and how to prevent it, I mean, I wish there was something we could do that would right now stop anyone else ever going through this and anyone else ever losing their life in this way. But the one thing that I've really noticed in terms of what has kept me here is talking. And it sounds so easy, but it isn't. But I tell you, the one difference that I have noticed is I have a very good friend. And I say this as something that happened fairly recently, within the last year. And I was in a not great place. And that friend, I just asked, can you talk? And the minute they were on the phone, I mean, they were amazing. But one of the first things they said was, Amy, are you feeling suicidal? And it made me stop and go, no, but I am really low. Yeah. And I am feeling, and I tried to work through how I was feeling. But the difference when you've got people around you that will have those conversations and effectively will hold on to you, even if you are feeling suicidal, or even if you're not and you're just feeling low, or something's going on. Having those conversations is huge, because it's also the fact that I think if we have those conversations early on and we get used to being able to talk about our mental health, it can then intervene at a point that might stop somebody turning to drink, drugs, alcohol, gambling, cutting themselves off entirely. And as I say, I'm only giving that example because of my own situation and the things I've witnessed that become contributing factors and and heighten your risk as well. Yeah. So if we can intervene early and make those conversations much, I don't want to say easier,
normalized,
but more common.
Normalized.
If we normalise having those conversations, I think that will make a huge difference. And I do think that's something that has shifted fairly recently, because I even remember when Wayne died, it was still, it was always the onus was always on the person who was feeling suicidal to do something about it. Yeah. And I know we have a role, individuals have a role, but when you're in that crisis yourself, it's really hard. Yeah. Whereas if we almost use everyone else as the life raft, and everyone else plays their part to try and keep you there.
You need the connectedness to come to you. You're not in a place to reach out for the connectedness. The connectedness needs to come to you. And I think that's the big difference that we've realised in the last few years, is that
I agree. It's not easy to ask for help. Yeah. And we see hashtags and we see people posting vlogs online. It is not that easy.
Indeed. Well, listen, we're heading towards the end of our podcast, but just some more questions, I guess, about you. You've been very honest and very open about what you've shared today, and we're so grateful for that. But I wondered about your own hobbies and pastimes. What do you do? You obviously get up and you make your bed in the morning,
yes,
but that's not a hobby or a pastime. And then, what book are you reading at the moment? That's the other thing I would like to ask you. And who's your favourite author? So pastimes, what book are you reading, and who's your favourite author?
So I have quite a few different hobbies, actually. I try and keep active. I really do try and keep active. So I've recently taken up reformer Pilates.
Oh, wow.
Which is very good.
Sounds a bit painful.
I know it's one of these things that looks more complicated than it actually is. But no, I really find that I get a lot from low impact activity that allows me to slow down mentally as well as physically. So whether it's walking or swimming or Pilates, I really enjoy. And the book that I'm actually reading just now, I actually think it's in my bag. It is called The Courage to be Happy. It's from a Japanese philosopher, and I actually read his first book, which is The Courage to be Disliked. Uh-huh. And again, I remember reading that last year, and I'd say it was probably it was probably a book that changed my way of thinking. So this is the second book, The Courage to be Happy. So I'm only a couple of chapters in, but it's these kind of things make
So
it.
are they your favourite author?
I do. I would say I enjoy self-help, philosophical books. If I'm not then escaping into a Sally Rooney kind of rom-com type novel as well.
Nothing wrong with a Sally Rooney. Do you have any regrets or unfulfilled ambitions for your life?
I think I'll always have regrets, and I think for a long time, and it's actually now that I'm sitting talking about this, I realise that I've come quite far even talking about it like this. As I used to be full of regrets. I used to be full of thinking I should have done something differently, or made the wrong decision, or just should have done better at something. Whereas right now, I don't feel I have any regrets currently.
Amazing.
I think I have had regrets, but right now, I don't feel I have regrets. And
Japanese philosophy is clearly working then.
Yeah. I feel, because I've had to make some quite big decisions recently in my personal life, in my work life. And I remember old Amy would have lost sleep and would have had tears and would have asked absolutely everybody on the planet to tell me what I should be doing, and do I take this option, do I do this? I have found a peace within myself to make decisions and stick by them. And even if they don't work out, I made the decision with all the information I had at the time. And I think that's given me a lot of peace, is to stop having the regrets that I maybe once had.
Amazing. You've been on quite a journey, really. Would it be okay to say that part of that journey is Wayne's legacy for you as well? That part of your journey of discovery is Wayne's legacy?
It really is. And I think that...
Is it okay to say that?
I think so, because, and I've thought about this before, that if Wayne could walk in the room right now, he would want this to be his legacy. He would want people to talk. He would want people to look out for other people, and because that was him. And I think he'd be happy knowing that his story has helped even one person, which I know it has. I've had, even since the podcast, and that's been before our one, the suicide prevention one that I hosted, people messaged on Instagram that have said, I've just got up and made the bed today, Amy.
Awesome.
And it's, if people can do that, if one person can do that because of Wayne, I think he'd be happy knowing that was his legacy.
Amy, I've got one final question for you, and it's a question I ask all my guests on the podcast, and that is, if someone is listening to this podcast or watching, and they're planning to take their life today, what would you say to them?
I would say, please don't. I would say, please look at John right now. Look at me sitting here. We're able to pick up this glass of water. We're able to touch this desk. We're able to look at each other and have a conversation. If you do something today, all of that goes tomorrow. And that's not to take away from the fact that people will be struggling. There are terrible things that people have to endure. The world is an awful place right now. There are so many things that people are having to shoulder. Yeah. But please don't act on the 1,000 things that you could act on to make that one decision. Yeah. Please hold on to the one reason not to. And that could be, as I've said, for me, just get through the hours initially, just make the bed, just get up, just look outside, just notice what the weather is, just do anything that isn't acting on how you're feeling right now, because I promise you it doesn't last forever. That's what I would want someone to know.
Thanks so much. Amy, we've had a great hour together. I'm so grateful for your time and your busy schedule. Thank you not just for sharing your personal and your private life so openly with us, but your journey and your professional life as well. So I'm really grateful to you, and more than grateful that you're part of this thing called the suicide community and the impact that you're bringing to it. So thank you so much.
Thank you to you, John. The work you do in Cameron's memory is amazing.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So thank you for being part of this episode of the Canmore Trust podcast. We hope you've benefited from being with us, and in particular from hearing the wisdom from Amy. Your safety is paramount to us. I said that at the outset, and I say it again to you. So if anything of today's discussion has activated concerns within you about your own safety, then please do reach out. You can engage with the Canmore Trust by texting us, texting Canmore, Canmore, to 85258. You can call the Papyrus 24/7 Helpline on 0800 068 4141. Or you can call the Samaritans at any time of day or night on 116 123, 116 123. The Canmore Trust's website, www.thecanmoretrust.co.uk, has a resource section which may well help you if you're seeking assistance with any aspect of well-being, mental ill health or suicide. It's there for you. Please access it and please use it. So once again, if you're struggling, please reach out. And if you're concerned or worried about someone else, please reach out. And thank you for being part of this, the Canmore Trust podcast. We will see you on another episode. Thank you.